Terri Kozlowski, welcome to Future Proof Career.
Thank you, Valarie. It's great to be here.
I'm so excited to have you. I am so interested in you and your podcast and your story. And I also saw a blog post where you highlighted your goals for 2021, and it was a really thorough blog. And I don't have goals yet, so I'm excited to talk about that process for you as well.
Great.
So tell me a little bit about your work. Maybe I'll leave it there.
I started out as a stay-at-home mom for about 15 years and didn't do anything but stay home and take care of the kids and the family. And then 9/11 occurred, and my husband is in the airline industry. So at that point, we had great financial issues arise. So I went back into the workforce, and I started out as a floater in a medical device company. And 15 years later, I'm vice president of that medical device company.
Wow.
So I went up, I learned everything through the channels, and am now on the board and help run that company as we end up moving into the next decade. So a lot of that is learning and realizing that you have skill sets you didn't know you had. So when I was a stay-at-home mom, I sold Tupperware. So I learned sales without realizing I was learning sales. And you don't realize those skill sets that you have. Time management. When you have kids, you have to learn time management because you have to figure out how to put them to bed, make sure you have quiet time, make sure that the house is clean, all of that. So time management is a skill set that I didn't realize I had until I ended up in the workforce again. So after the past 2 years, I decided that I wanted to have my own business. And I became a life coach. I became certified as a life coach. And I started mainly because a book decided to be, I became pregnant with the book is really what happened. Because I had been asked over the years about my story and if I was ever going to write it. And I said, not just no, but hell no. I didn't want to do it. And then the summer of 2018, I became pregnant with the book, and it just poured out of me. And in about 9 months, I had a book done. Now I had to go through an editing process, and that took some more time. Had to write a book proposal, and that took more time. And October of this year, I signed a book contract. So my book will come out in March of 2021. And my story is, for a short version of it, is I was sexually abused when I was a child at the age of 11 while visiting my mother. She allowed it to occur because she wanted drugs. So they offered her drugs for my innocence. And after that happened, she then abandoned my sister and I on the streets of Albuquerque, New Mexico, and we were 2,000 miles away from home.
Jeez.
So at 11, I became an instant adult and had to figure out how to get me and my baby sister home. So I did that, and I got off the airplane when we got back to Pittsburgh and said to my dad, I needed to go to counseling.
Wow.
I had presence enough, and I was aware that what had happened was a unique trauma that had to be dealt with, and it had to be dealt with quickly. So that is basically the crux of the trauma. But the book is about how to go from being fearful, because I became fearful of everything. If you can't trust your mother, who can you trust?
Yeah.
And you can't trust men. So, everybody in my life I became very fearful of. And what we don't realize is the ego uses those fears even when we are no longer in a place that is dangerous. So in everyday life, those fears come up. So my book is about how I transcended the fear and overcome all of that to become my authentic self.
Wow. That's an amazing story. How old was your sister?
She's 11 months to the day younger than I am. So she was 10.
Wow. So she was probably fearful too, I imagine. Old enough to know this is strange.
She did not have the same experience I had. She was not sexually abused.
Yeah.
She was emotionally abused and she was abandoned like I was. But the way she dealt with things and the way I dealt with things were very, very different, because she was completely unaware and did not realize
Oh.
the trauma that was
Mm-hmm.
done to her. And it wasn't until she reached her mid 40s that she actually realized how all of this had affected her.
Yeah.
And despite the fact that she watched me, she knew what happened to me. I did share my story with her. And all the different traumas that I had in dealing with my mother over the years. But her experience is different than mine. Her personality is different than mine.
Mm-hmm.
And so how she deals with fears, and she's still extremely anxious. She's very fearful. And when you try to talk to her about it, she really doesn't want to delve into it because it's very emotional for her. Where
Mm-hmm.
I suppressed all my emotions, she just explodes with emotions, and she doesn't know how
Yeah.
to handle how she's feeling. And that to me comes across as everybody handles their pain differently.
Yeah.
And what works for me may not work for you, but I have insight as to how what I used, what worked for me, may be able to help you.
Right. And it's interesting too how two people, a lot of times siblings, go through the same thing and see things totally differently. You know, they had such a different experience from that.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So you mentioned going into medical device sales. That seems it seems different for you since you seem so creative and like a life coach. That seems did you enjoy that type of work?
Well, I'm still doing it. I'm still vice
Okay.
president of the company.
Oh
And
wow.
what it ends up being is one of the skill sets that I knew I've always had was I'm extremely well organized. I
Mm-hmm.
can come into your office space and you tell me how you work, what your workflow is, and I will set up a system for you in your office so that after a project, you can still find everything. And a lot of people work with piles. I don't work with piles. My husband is a
Okay.
piler. So learning how to handle piles and okay, this pile is what this, is a certain thing so that you know what your piles are, because other people use filing systems. I have files and files and files, and I can tell you if you've been in my file drawer. I know that. So because I was so well organized, that is the skill that blossomed in the medical device company, because we are FDA regulated, we are ISO regulated, we're CE regulated. So all those different types of bodies require somebody to be organized to keep track of all the documentation that is required for a medical device manufacturer.
Gotcha.
So that is my skill set that blossomed there. What is happening now is they are expanding. We've always had distributors who handled marketing and sales. We are now doing that. So that was where my creativity now is coming out. I'm taking on a lot more
Okay.
roles in the marketing areas and the creating areas, writing.
Right.
I'm skilled writer. So at this
Mm-hmm.
point in time, they're starting to take advantage of that and seeing how they're coming across in the marketplace.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned organization too, and I think now it's a little bit easy to appear organized, but then like if you have a bunch of things saved to your desktop, you could still be pretty discombobulated even in the electronic world. And I think a lot of times too, if you're organized physically, that helps you be organized mentally. Do you feel the same way?
Mental organization is a key to being organized in every other area of your life, because your insides reflect your outsides and vice versa. So if you are disorganized in your everyday life, then somewhere on the inside, you haven't quite figured everything out for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And whether it's goal setting or being able to handle stress or time management, all of that outward is a reflection of your inward. So for
Mm-hmm.
me, mindset work is where most people end up needing to actually do work to make their outside life, what everybody sees, more organized, more peaceful, more mindful, and happier.
I feel like I need this because I'm always losing stuff. I'm always losing my phone or my keys. And I'm like, this takes a lot of like mental drain out of my life because
Mm-hmm.
the time that you waste and the stress, it increases your blood pressure when you're constantly trying to find something.
Yes.
So are you into like the Marie Kondo, minimalism?
I've read all of that and I understand it. And for some people that works really well. I don't know that I'm a minimalist. Um, I'm very tactile. So I like stuff. I like pens. I like notebooks. And I have lots of pens and notebooks.
Uh-huh.
But I use them. So they have a purpose. And that's one of the things that I think Marie focuses on is it needs to be useful. It needs to be pretty.
Yep.
Or it needs to have a memory attached to it. And I do think all my stuff does that. In 2017, I think it was, it might have been 2018, I went through a massive, I'm getting rid of everything. And I touched every single thing in my house from my basement to my attic and got rid of stuff.
Wow.
And part of that was I knew something was happening and I didn't know what it was. What it ended up being was the book. I became pregnant with the book.
Mm-hmm.
So right before you get pregnant, most women realize they go through this extra energy where they're getting things organized and they don't know why.
Mm-hmm.
That is our inner selves telling us there's something happening. So I went through that experience, and about every January I go through and spend the first month each week saying I'm going to, okay, this week I'm going to concentrate on dealing with stuff that is built up in my office. Because a lot of times people, especially entrepreneurs, and now that everybody's working from home, they get this buildup in their office that they don't go through.
Right.
So every January I go through it just to make sure I'm not keeping it. And besides, it's also a really good way to prepare for tax season.
Yeah, that's a good point. So you're mentioning January 2021. So maybe we get into your goals. You published a very robust blog post. And I was like, this is awesome for a couple of reasons. Number one, that they were so organized and laid out. Number two, you had done them quite a bit in advance. I think a lot of people wait until New Year's Eve to do that. And then also you're sort of putting it out into the world to say, hey, look, these are my goals. Is your intention to have some sort of accountability by putting it out there?
So goal setting. I've always had goals, but in 2019, I did an experiment and I wrote them down. I had never written them down before, and writing them down does two things. The one thing it does is it uses both the left and right hemispheres of the brain. So you're using your cognitive and your creative skills. The other thing that happens is you are physically writing. So now you have your body involved in it. And scientists have proven that when you write down your goals, you're more likely to actually accomplish them. All kinds of studies have been done on that. And if you check out the blog post, there are links in there to the studies.
Okay.
One of the things that I did was in this experiment was write it down, and then I posted them on my desk.
Oh, okay.
So that I saw them all the time to remind me that I had things I wanted to accomplish this year. So this is my reminder. So this year's, 2020's goals are sitting there. I can see them every day. I wrote a blog post about those 2020 goals. And when I've already written out my 2021 goals, I don't do 10, I do 9. And the reason I do 9 is for some reason that 10th one just kind of feels too much.
The double digits.
So I keep it at 9. And when I wrote the blog post in 2020 about creating your vision, I went ahead and did a year in review to let people know how I did on my 2019 goals.
Yeah.
And I had accomplished all of my 2019 goals. And one of the two things that I talked about there was I wanted to read more. I loved reading when I was growing up. And as we become adults, when we have children and we get households, we just don't go back and do those things. So I decided I wanted to read more. So I said, okay, I'm going to read a book a month. And the way I then figured out how to do that was I joined a book club. And for me, putting it on my calendar means it'll get done. So I'm very much into scheduling. If I schedule it and it's on
Yeah.
my calendar, I will get it accomplished. If it's not on my calendar, forget it. It won't happen. I can think that I want to do it. I want to exercise, but if I don't actually schedule it, it won't happen. So that's just me. But a lot of people can say, I'm going to do it, and they just do it. A lot of people are like me that they need to schedule. So I scheduled being in book club every month. They pick the book because I'm very specific in what I read. I read self-help. I read memoir. So I read certain things, and book club was going to have me read other things. So I joined book club, loved it, joined a second book club. So last year I read, my goal was 52 books, one book a week.
Wow.
And I accomplished 65.
Wow, that's amazing.
So this year I had, I think, 70. I don't think I'm going to accomplish 70 this year. And it's just, for me, recently, I mean, I was doing great. I was reading, 4 or 5 books a month without any problem. The last November, I got 2 books in for the 2 book clubs. And December, we only have 1 book club, and I'm struggling to get through that book, and it's a short book. So part of it now is timing, and where I'm transitioning away from wanting to read, because I'm reading lots of other things that are not books. So I have an app called Pocket.
Okay.
And Pocket, you can, when you're on the internet, you can click your little pocket to save, and it saves it in your pocket. And so you can go back anytime and read those articles that you thought were interesting.
Okay.
So what I realized is I read, another 50,000 words on Pocket annually.
Okay.
So that's a couple, that's still a lot of books added to that. I think one year I read 15 books, in my pocket that really weren't pocket. They were just articles. So I'm reading, I'm just not reading those books. So part of setting goals is making sure that you really do want to do it. And a lot of people really don't know what they want.
Right.
They want to lose weight, but okay, what does it mean to lose weight? Are you wanting to lose 10 pounds? Or are you wanting to get healthy? Because getting healthy and losing weight are 2 different things.
Yeah.
And people then think that it's the same, and it's not. So getting very intentional about what those goals are, writing them down, and then figuring out a plan that to help you succeed at it. So for example, I had for 2019, write my book. And for 2020, it was get the book published. So getting the book published, I broke down into steps, because getting your book published is kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
There's lots of steps involved. So each quarter, I broke down and gave 1 major step per quarter. And then each month, I broke down that quarter step into monthly steps so that I could go ahead and get those things done. So first quarter was really about editing my rough draft. So that's what I did. I scheduled it, put it on my calendar, how much time it would take for me to go through and edit the book to where I was satisfied with it. Second quarter was getting it edited by a professional. So, and that, it took 8 weeks of somebody else's time. So that was the second quarter. Third quarter was writing the book proposal and sending out book proposals, so that hopefully in the third quarter, I'd have a publishing contract, which is the case. And I think because I wrote it down and because I broke it up, it made it much simpler. And I just knew I was going to get published. Because I had broken everything down. So making sure that we set up ourselves to succeed is a really important aspect of setting your goals, because that also encourages you. It shows that you are committed to it on a regular basis. It's not just I'm going to lose weight.
Which never works, because I think that's most people's goal. And, I see those people out running, for 2 weeks in January, and then it's over. So once you have these goals, it sounds like you make them really actionable. I get stuck a lot of times in the research phase, like I have this goal and then I'm like, oh, that this would be cool. And I just go and I read a ton about this thing and then I don't actually take action on it. Do you kind of limit that research phase? Because I imagine for like getting a book published, most people don't know how to do that. You'd have to kind of take a class or do something to know what to do.
I did that, but I took the Hay House Writers course back in 2018, the fall of 2018.
Okay.
So, because before I wrote the book, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't
Mm-hmm.
how does this work? How does this process work? So I tend to do my research early on and work it out that, okay, one of the things that they taught me was I had to have a writer's platform. Well, what's a writer's platform? Basically, it's a website where you blog every week. So,
Oh.
in January 1st, 2019, I started a weekly blog and have been blogging since. That blog turned out to end up in August of this year becoming a podcast. Soul
Mm.
Solutions podcast came out of my blog because what ended up happening is I saw my son mention to me that podcast is the thing. You can connect to
Mm-hmm.
your audience better. So I found a class. And through the class, I'm like, okay, this doesn't look hard. We're amongst COVID. I'm home.
Yeah.
Let's
Mm-hmm.
go ahead and do this. And as soon as that was done, my son said, now you have to get a YouTube channel. So
Oh.
I started videotaping me recording, and that has become the YouTube channel. So my author's platform that I started as something was just a blog has now blossomed into a lot more
Mm-hmm.
that is much more authentically me. I'm reaching my audience. I'm helping the people that I want to help. And as you go through with the research of your goals, it either resonates with you or it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
The more it resonates with you, the more actionable it can become. So when you get stuck, my thought is maybe it's not necessarily something you really want to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I was thinking too, as you were talking about how long that process is for your book, you had to do blog posts. You took your class in I think you said 2018.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like I'm going to scramble and write this thing really fast and then it's just going to get magically published. I think if we're realistic to ourselves about how difficult and how long some things take, we might change our goals a little bit. Or, if we're realistic about how much bandwidth we actually have, that could change things too.
Right. So if you decide that you wanted to write a book, you have a podcast, so you already have a built-in audience, and you're putting together every show things that could be in your book.
Mm-hmm.
So is there a book in your future? Possibly. Is it require you to have work put and time dedicated to writing? Absolutely. And you have children. So it's not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily now is a good time for you to consider writing a book. Maybe in 5 years, and you'll have a lot more material in 5 years. It may be
Mm-hmm.
really easy just to gather that material and say, here, ghostwriter, organize this. This is the outline of what I'd like to say, and have somebody else put it together for you. That
Yeah.
could still mean that you come out with a book in 5 years, but it's done in a way that you can do it and it still meets your goal.
Mm-hmm.
But you've figured out a way to process it and make things actionable for you with the time you currently have.
Yeah, this is making me think I should be doing like a timeline. So have my goals for 2021, but then also think ahead 2022, 2025, as much as
Mm-hmm.
possible. Do you do that yourself?
A little bit. With the book, when I became pregnant with the book in 2018, it was kind of like, all right, the goal would be to work on getting it published by 2020. And I did that. Um, so at this point, I'm looking at transitioning out of my 9 to 5 job.
Hmm.
So I'm looking at hopefully doing that by the end of next year.
Okay.
So do I have plans? Yes. Do I see myself working at the 9 to 5 the rest of my life? No, I don't see myself doing that in 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
So but I have to work at certain things now so that the income that
Mm-hmm.
I have from that job is now coming through my business.
Right. Yeah, I think that's what I've been preaching a lot in this show too, is have a plan B.
Mm-hmm.
And even if it's a job that you like, you could always lose it. You could always be laid off. Something could always happen. So have something else on the back burner, at least an idea of what you'd like to do.
Mm-hmm.
And probably doing that timeline would really help you with that too. Like, what's
Right.
a realistic goal?
Mm-hmm.
So can you share some of your 2021 goals with us? I'd love to hear them.
All right. I'm going to have to pull that out.
Sure.
But I am one of those that writes these things down, and I do plan them out because it's important that we think about them and then we decide whether or not it is something that we are looking to process. So I do have on my goal list that I want to read, but I haven't put the number of books in because I know this year I'm not going to make my 70 goal. So I'm thinking that maybe if I put 50, which is still gets me about one a week, but it doesn't commit me. And I know that I will do 24 because that's how many I'll do for book club. So that requires me to read an additional 26 books, which I normally do anyway. So at this point, I think that's a doable goal. I want to expand my YouTube channel. Okay. I want to monetize my website more, and I want to monetize the podcast. So that's going to take a lot of time. Growing the YouTube channel is going to take a lot of time and effort, on top of the fact that I'm still writing a blog post every week. I'm still recording a show every week. So, we're looking at, where does this fit in? How do I fit this in my weekly schedule when I'm still working the 40-hour job?
Yeah, you're doing a lot.
So do I think I can accomplish it? Yes. I just have to break it down into steps that are required for me to do. I'm growing my email list, which is a huge thing because I want to create a course next year. So I'm looking at, when do I want to launch that course? I'd like to launch that course by third quarter. So I have to spend second quarter creating the course. But first quarter, I have to go ahead and break that down and saying, okay, exactly what do I want to teach? What does my audience want? What do they need help with? Once I get that research done, then you can go ahead and spend second quarter creating the course so that the third quarter you can launch the course. So the reading, the growing the YouTube channel, creating a course and launching it. I want to be more fearless and bold, which means put myself out there more. A lot of people stay in their comfort zones, and I'm working very hard to get out of my comfort zone and try different things. For example, I have just applied to write for Entrepreneur Magazine.
Wow.
Would I have done that on my own 6 months ago? No. Do I think now? Yeah, I can do this. So part of that is building your confidence to be bold and to step out of your comfort zone. And a lot of people are really comfortable in their comfort zone. That is where we have our confidence. I can do this. But the real growth for most people actually comes when you move out of your comfort zone and you get a little uncomfortable with doing something. That is where real growth happens. And a lot of people don't realize that being uncomfortable about something means you're starting to grow. You're pushing your boundaries. And the more we grow and expand, the happier our soul is, the more peaceful we become, and the more laid back we actually get in our day-to-day lives.
That's interesting to me, though, because I feel like you're doing so many things to get out of a typical person's comfort zone, the podcast, the YouTube, the book, So I guess for you, you've just kind of probably been pushing it for years now. This is not a new thing.
I'm an introvert.
Oh, wow.
Okay. I'm an introvert. And so I am way happier sitting back and watching people than I am when actually going out and doing something. So for me, a lot of this growth was for my ability to help a larger audience, because I really believe that what I can help people with is really crucial for the world right now. People need to overcome their ego. People need to understand that the ego is part of them, but it's a part of them that is meant to protect ourselves. And that's its job. The ego's only job is to protect us. The problem is the ego doesn't understand the difference between a credible threat and one that's imagined. So for an imagined fear, it reacts exactly the same as if there was a tiger getting ready to pounce on us.
Right.
Okay. So the example I use is I was sexually molested by 3 Hispanic men. So my ego for a very long time protected me from Hispanic men. If I saw them, I got out of their way. I stayed away from them. I did not go into places that there were a large Hispanic population. However, I ended up working with a lot of Hispanic people. They're very loving, friendly individuals.
Right.
And so my personal experience in my lifetime negates what my ego was trying to protect me from. Okay. So I had to realize, you know what, there's nothing wrong with Hispanic men. They're loving and affectionate people, and they haven't harmed me, except 3 a long, long, long time ago, 1 episode. And a lot of people, whether it's trauma or not, have really placed fear of others because of things like social media, news, watching movies. You know, if you look at the movies we watch, there's a lot of violence in the movies we watch. And these movies are showing certain races of people doing all the violence, not necessarily a wide band of cultures doing the violence. And the reality is, if you look at history has shown that the Anglo-Saxons have done more damage to human populations across the world than any other race. And yet that is not how it's depicted in Hollywood.
Or in our history books.
Correct.
Sadly.
So the ego cannot tell the difference between us watching a movie and seeing violence done by gangs, whatever race they may be, and then us walking down our little town street and seeing those people of color. And our ego reacts, and we become, you know, very aware all of a sudden, when most of the time we wouldn't have been. And if you start really paying attention to all the acts of compassion and kindness that occurs when an African American opens the door for you, or when the Asian helps you pick up your packages that you dropped when you were at the grocery store. Those types of acts our ego doesn't pay attention to, but our soul does. And we have to awaken the soul to remind us that there is more acts of compassion in the world that we have on a day-to-day basis than those acts of violence, that we feed our egos by what we watch on the news and what we watch in our media.
Right. And so when you say ego, that's basically sort of your essence, and it comes with all this baggage. Is that kind of what you mean?
No. You have 2 parts to yourself. The ego, whose whole job is to protect you. That's all it is. It is to protect you. And then your soul. But the ego's voice tends to be that screaming voice in your head, that monkey mind that occurs that reminds you that you didn't clean the house today and your kids are screaming, they didn't get a bath. That's the ego telling you all the things you didn't do. Whereas the soul is going to say, remember, you're sick. You need a rest. You're taking care of your body. That's important, because if you get sicker, you can't take care of your children. And it'll be 4 days before they get a bath because you are just too sick because you did not take care of yourself. But those are whispers. The soul whispers to us where the ego screams. So what do we pay attention to? We tend naturally to pay attention to the screaming voice because it's louder. But if we get quiet and meditate or through prayer, but if we get quiet, we start listening and we start hearing the soul. And in that silence, we gain strength, because the soul is going to help nurture our beings for us to then realize, oh, that's the ego talking. I don't need to pay attention. Or that ego is reminding me of a fear I used to have, but I remember now that that's not the case. The Hispanic men are safe. So we have to become aware. We have to wake up to the fact that the ego is in control of most of the world right now. All the ego personalities, all the violence, all the social media, all the bullying, all of that is the ego's rise into infamy. Whereas the soul, there is a movement now, there's an awakening occurring across the globe where those that have awakened to the soulful voice are being able to help and encourage people to be at peace, have harmony, understanding that there are two sides within ourselves that we need to deal with. So there's two sides in society we need to deal with.
I see. So, Terri, I think I read somewhere that you have a Native American background. Is this? Oh, go ahead.
I am half Athabascan Indian.
Okay. Is what you focus on with your research, is that similar to like Native American teachings? This is a very ignorant question, I'm sure.
A lot of my teachings can date back to indigenous peoples, because it's the history of being in harmony with earth, being in harmony with people, being in harmony with yourself, being in harmony with the animals and nature, because it is, if we don't take care of the planet, we won't have a place to live. And the indigenous peoples completely understand that. They've lived in that environment. They don't live in cities. They don't build structures that keep them from connecting to nature. And one of the best ways to listen to your soul is to go out into nature, hug a tree, plant a garden, teach your kids to play in the dirt, because that tactile with nature helps us to remember who we really are. And who we really are is spirit, not this egoic body, because this egoic body dies, but the spirit lives on, the soul lives on.
And even when you go outside and you get your hands in the dirt, you feel better. It just feels so relaxing and soothing.
It does. It does.
So do you live out in the country? Are you outside often?
I do not live in the country. I do live on an acre of land, though.
Oh, okay.
And our ultimate goal is to, when I transition out of my 9 to 5, is to move to New Mexico, to a place that is in the high desert, that I'm surrounded everywhere I can be by nature. I think that communal, getting me back into that communal with the land is going to be very important for me for my next step in my journey. And I see that transition occurring. Have I been in nature? Yes. After my trauma, I spent lots and lots of time in the woods by myself. I spent years hiking. My husband and I have a motorcycle, and we go riding into the mountains, done 1,000-mile trips all on back roads, because we like being out. So yes, I garden, but that's the ultimate goal, because it is reconnecting with the earth is very important for our souls, because our souls are part of all the energy that is the earth.
My husband and I got into a little bit of a debate. I watch a YouTube family. They're like a family vlogger, and they had a son who, I guess he wasn't doing well in school. He was acting up, and they sent him to like this outdoor retreat for a month. And I was like, that's a pretty good idea. I think like he gets to be outside, like really in touch with the earth, and gets away from his environment. And my husband was thinking maybe it was a little harsh, to send him out, and where it could be dangerous, because it probably, nature is kind of dangerous sometimes.
It can be.
Yeah, but I just thought that's a really good thing. Like if you can start that habit at an earlier age where you can be comfortable outdoors.
Take your family on a hike.
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays, even in the city, there are all kinds of parks that are set aside with hiking trails in them. A lot of mountain bike trails that are out there where you can take your kids biking. So there's lots of ways to participate. Camping. Both of my boys were heavily involved in scouting for, a decade. So we were camping all the time. And it was important for them. They learned how to be self-sufficient. They learned how to be one and not harm the earth while they were in that space.
So, I know we talked about organization, and that kind of helped you with your career in your business world. And I think maybe this is a guess, that maybe another thing that could have helped you is you have a very calm presence. Do you think that's helped you in business too? Not panicking?
Not panicking has always been something, because I think that came out of the trauma. I learned early on that panic does not help you get out of the situation. So I can, in a hostile situation or in a very stressful situation, I can stay very calm. I can get through the crisis. And then when it's safe, I do my little breakdown. But I've had a lot of people tell me what a calm personality I have. That has not always been the case.
Yeah.
My husband can attest to you that I have been very high strung, very stressed, and it's through the reawakening of my spirit, the understanding and transcending the fears of the egoic mind. Through that process, I've become calmer. I've become more peaceful. I've become more authentically me. Who is this calm personality? But when the ego takes over, we become something that we were never meant to be. Right. And a lot of people who are living an egoic life feel terrible. They don't like their life. They want a different life. But if they got quiet, and if they realized who they are and became fearless being their authentic selves, then you're going to see a huge change in personalities, because who they really are comes out. And a lot of us don't remember who we are.
And I wonder how many people burn out because they're unable to get to that non-egoic, part of themselves where they're constantly stressed out, worried, living in fear.
Probably a lot. One of the things, I have an article that I wrote called Remember Who You Are, because I believe that we are all born knowing who we are. We all come to this planet Earth knowing what our mission here is, who we authentically are, and how we're supposed to live our lives. But what happens is we are taught, no offense to parents, we are taught from our parents how to be fearful. We are taught that when we do good, we get rewarded, but when we do bad, we get punished. But maybe what these children are saying to us is, this isn't being bad. This is just behavior you don't like, because I'm being authentically me. Yeah. So there has to be a new paradigm in how we look at our children, because our children are authentically themselves until they're about 7 or 8, when we really start imposing our own will on them and our own societal behaviors on them. But up until then, when they decide, my granddaughter at the age of 4 was trying to jump off what I called a cliff. It's just a hill, Grandma. And she jumped and she was fine. I said, just be careful. Yeah. No broken bones. Just be careful. Pay attention. I have my hiking boots on. I'll be good. And she jumped around and was fine. But I was the one that was fearful. She wasn't. She had no fear. And most children don't have fear. We instill fear into them. So as we domesticate our children, because that's really what's happening, we are domesticating them to fit into our world, our society, we shut out who they really are. And so as adults, we have to spend time figuring out who we are and start remembering that process. And when we do, and when we realize that our authenticness is really who we were meant to be, and we start living that, we feel better. Our lives feel happier. We are more at peace. We are calmer. And other people notice it. Now, some people may not like it though.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
there are those people in your family, especially, who all of a sudden you're different, you're changed. Why are you like this?
Yeah.
Those people are going to be there. And the only people that have to stay in your life is family. You have to figure out, now, this is who I really am. And I want to share that with you.
Yeah.
And I want you to be who you really are. And what's interesting is when you actually take a survey of whether or not you want others to be authentically themselves, everybody says they want the other person to be authentically themselves, but they are not being authentically themselves. So if that's what we want, we have to mirror that. We have to show people that it's safe to be authentically you.
Right. And I think people have some interior motives too. Like, you want your friend to be the same. Like, they have this spot in your life and that's what they're supposed to do. They have this role. And when they change, it kind of messes things up for that person.
But we all change. And that's the part that people don't realize, is that who I was 20 years ago, 23 years ago, my husband married me. Who I was then and who I am now are very, very, very different people. And who he was then and now is very different. But together we grew. And that's part of any relationship, and I thoroughly believe that there are people that are meant to be in our lives long term, and there are people that are meant to be in our lives for a season.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it is we're helping them for a season or they're helping us for a season. But we are not meant, especially in this society, to have those long-term associations with people who don't feed our soul.
Yeah.
That is not how we're supposed to live our lives, because a lot of people suck that life force out of you.
Yeah.
And you have those people in your life, and some of them are family members and you need to learn to set personal boundaries with them.
Mm-hmm.
But other people you can just walk away from.
Yeah. Yeah. And most people want to be a loyal friend, but not to the point where it's harming you. So,
mm-hmm. And you have to learn how to manage that. And I thoroughly believe that there were people in my life for a season. I was part of what I affectionately call the biker gang. And I led that for 6 years and heavily involved, saw these people 2-3 times a week, spent weekends with them, long weekends with them. And I don't see any of them now.
Mm-hmm.
They were meant for a season to help me gain confidence, really confidence. Mm-hmm. Help me learn to organize people, especially volunteers, how to motivate people who have no reason to do this, to help me in any way. And what it ended up doing was enhancing my people skills, so that for the coaching, I have different avenues. I can relate to them differently because I've had this experience of dealing with all these other personalities.
Right. I wish I would have known that in high school, that it's okay to find new friends and move to a new stage.
Yeah.
So Terri, I feel like every time I listen to your podcast, Soul Solutions, I always learn so much. I learned so much from you today. Where can we find you?
You can find me on the Soul Solutions podcast. Every Tuesday, a new episode comes out. I'm on wherever you listen, I'm there. whether it's Amazon or Apple or Google, Spotify, all of those I'm on Pandora. So I'm everywhere. Also, terrikozlowski.com is where you can find my blog. And I blog every week. So every article comes out every Tuesday. So Tuesday is the big new subject day. And then I'll have the book coming out in March of 2021, Raven Transcending Fear. It's my memoir of overcoming fear and limiting beliefs. So those are the three main things. You can go to my website and there's goals, and I can give you a link, Valarie, for a freebie for your audience.
Oh, great.
On how to set goals. It's a 21 questions that will inspire them to not only set goals, but make them actionable.
Oh, perfect. I need that too. Well, thank you so much, Terri. This was lovely.
You're welcome. Thank you very much for having me, Valarie.
Bye-bye.